Nice to meet you, Tag. My name's Pete. I'm here with the Workers' Party of Britain, coming to you from Birmingham today, fresh from the campaign trail in Rochdale still. Obviously, as we've said already, I'm not originally from Birmingham, not an authentic Brummie whatsoever. But I was born and grew up in Belfast before I moved out of the place. Tag, obviously, you have developed a pretty impressive following on social media, and you've been doing God's work in solidarity with the Palestinian cause as well. Now we'll get on to that in just a minute. But what I'd like to know first of all is you describe yourself as a stand-up comedian, as a writer, a musician, a voiceover artist. Is there anything I'm missing?
This is probably a list from my website, which is kind of half serious, half not so serious. If it mentions anything about Michelle
Oh
de
yeah,
Bruyn's
yeah,
ex,
yeah. I
that's
think I
not
noticed
true.
that as well, but I didn't
That's
write
just
that down now. No, I took that as tongue in cheek. Yeah,
okay. Thank God, thank God. Yeah. Well, first of all, you won't know who she is anyway. She's just kind of like a weird kind of fallen icon in Ireland. But yeah. So I just do lots of different things, I suppose. Not because I think I'm great at them, but mostly because when you're trying to survive in the arts, as we touched on earlier, in Ireland, you have to do lots of different things to survive.
yeah.
So, with the exception of Cillian Murphy, there aren't really many actors from Cork who were propelled into stardom and could live off the acting. So I do some acting, I do some comedy, live comedy. I suppose everything I do, I think is comedy, although other people don't think it is. There's a bit of a purity test in comedy. Like if unless you're doing pure stand-up, you're not really a comedian. But I do
Yeah.
feel like everything I do is through the prism of satire, I suppose, is a better way of looking at it.
Well, I think
So
it's
I've done
better.
some,
It's better than vice versa. Anyway, it's better than not trying to do comedy and people laughing at it.
yeah, yeah, true, true. Yeah, yeah.
But
But
I watched your wee film Miscabea just the other day actually, and I thought that was very moving. A really nice wee film and beautifully shot as well. I would
thank you.
recommend that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so I think if you come in as the comedian as well, then people can kind of get surprised if there's moments of pathos in it and there's poignancy in it. So that's kind of like a trick I try to do. I try to present as if I'm a comedian, and then the show is actually about mental illness or alcoholism or
Yeah.
colonialism. Like it's
Yeah.
because I suppose it's a trick as old as time itself that you try and make someone laugh first of all and kind of disarm them, and
Well,
then
that's it.
they
It's a
might be
spoonful
interested
of
in hearing
sugar
something.
technique, isn't it? Really? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my whole
So,
shtick, I suppose, really that type of difficult areas to go and do comedy in. That's very attractive to me. Also because it's very funny.
yeah.
Like the obviously what's going on in the Middle East right now on paper is obviously not funny at all. But like if you take something like a house share situation to depict the shit show that was and is Brexit. Like that was
Yes.
one of the first sketches I did that went very viral in Britain, and I think hopefully it just captured something in the moment that rather than it being this real nuanced thing, it's actually very straightforward. It's just a
Yeah.
bunch of lads in their late 30s still stuck in a house share in the middle of lockdown. Do you know? So there's
Yeah.
something I
Absolutely.
do think there's something really powerful about satire there. Like Chris Morris would be one of my satire heroes, and I remember him saying something before about unless there's some sort of utility to the humor, he's not really that interested in it. Like he feels that humor should be there to provoke. And I do feel the same, to be honest. Like I do get a disillusion when I've done stand up before and I'm like, okay, that got a laugh, but really what's the point in
Yeah.
that? And I'm not disrespect. I mean, some people are glorious at stand up and it's all built in. The politics is all built in, but I found it tricky to do stand up without kind of wandering into just stories about me like that may or may not be funny.
So would that
So
have been your influences when you were getting into stand-up? Would it have been sort of political comedians?
yeah, definitely. I mean, like pretty much any. I mean, Chris Morris, Armando Iannucci, Stuart Lee as a stand-up, I suppose, would be all the typical cliched lefties like I like.
Yeah.
But I think particularly Chris Morris's stuff because there's just something so like truly dangerous about what he's doing. Like it's complete risk taking and it has to. It's like these days when people get offended by satire online and they say, oh, I liked the one he did about that, but I don't agree with that one, or that's a
Yeah.
bit much now. Which the whole point of satire is that it's going to provoke, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
yeah.
I don't think I've seen anything that affected me in terms of comedy that affected me so powerfully as Brass Eye did back in the day, when I was
Like
watching the first
like the
time.
Brass Eye episode on Tadhg like
Yeah.
is a masterpiece. It's the best 30 minutes of provocative comedy I've ever seen in my life. And like if you came out with that now online even, it would be, you know, you'd be put in the bowl corner for sure. But to do it on mainstream television, like it's just, it'll never be done again. The man is just a complete and utter genius, I think.
On mainstream television with mainstream celebrities, it really was a tour de force.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I love watching them in conversation with Stuart Lee as well. That's two great minds when they're playing
Yeah.
together.
Do you know
Yeah,
what I'm not mad about in that world though? I don't think I'd have the balls, to be honest, to actually send up a celebrity to their face. There's a kind of an like, well, how should I say? There's a coldness in that that I'm not capable of. I'm better doing satire in my room on my own, and then I'll just throw
yeah.
it out, and people can make of it what they will. But to actually sit and eyeball somebody who you're going to destroy, I would find tough.
Well, that's yeah. It's interesting you raise that because it's totally different from what you're doing. When you do something that is very powerful, like your satire on the role that is played by the Palestinian Authority, but you're playing all those roles yourself. You're that's totally a one man band that you've got going on there.
I'd like to think as well what I try to do is like it's not usually about people. Like I'm not really
Yeah,
satirizing individuals. It's more about like ways of thinking or like Western hypocrisy is a kind of an obsession for me for sure. You know, just even and obviously we'll get onto it, but just the way in which the West responded to the invasion of Ukraine versus the way it's responded to Palestine when they have so much in common. You know,
yeah,
in spite of what the mainstream media will tell you, they do have so much in common, and that difference and that hypocrisy in that is something that I thought was interesting to send up rather than individuals themselves. Because first of all, I'm not very good at accents, and
right.
I would just leave it to people who are good impressionists, you know, like. But I actually sending up ideas or kind of ways of thinking, I think can sometimes be very powerful as well, you know.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, we saw that hypocrisy absolutely without wanting to move on too much into politics yet, but we saw that hypocrisy, of course. And when you look just at how Celtic fans and the Green Brigade were told not to bring their Palestinian flags or banners into the stadium long before, of course, October 7th happened, before even the invasion of Ukraine, and then all of a sudden, every football stadium in the land was decked out in blue and yellow. So the
Exactly.
hypocrisy was huge even years ago. But thinking
Exactly.
about I just for the sake of any viewers who haven't seen this tweet, I'll put up a link to it on the video before it goes out. But Tag has done a fantastic satirical look at the role that is played by the Palestinian Authority, where you play and take on each of these roles. One is the personification of the Palestinian Authority. The other is a member of the Palestinian people, and then there's the West, of course, as well, and Israel, who are passing manila envelopes into the hands of the PA. I've got a couple of questions really around this. One is more of a technical question or on the creative side. Is how do you come up with something like that? What's your process of writing that and getting it produced in the end?
Well, it's very straightforward because these sketches came out of lockdown. So in lockdown, there was me and my mate in a house staring at each other with mutual suspicion and fear. Like, and eventually I convinced him to pick up a camera. Now he's an actor himself as well, and he's actually brilliant, and he'd appear in some of them. But sometimes I'd have an idea for something, and I would just have my buddy. He would shoot it. We'd have limited lighting, and it was a pure lockdown kind of thing. And then some of those sketches did really well. And it's this kind of simplicity of good. I hope, good comedy or good satire that it doesn't really matter that much that like I don't have a full cast and I don't have like a massive budget for costume. So I'd end up just putting on wigs that had been hanging around the house from this old gig I did on TV with RT a few years ago, and my mates shooting them all. So it's a kind of a necessity being the mother of invention thing.
Absolutely,
Um,
yeah,
and it's just getting the shots. I mean, I've traditionally worked with people who have a good sense of where to be in front of the camera. I'm actually not good with that kind of stuff at all. But once you see how it's done, it's kind of straightforward again when comedy is the main thing as opposed to production values. So it came out of like necessity and it being a simple kind of thing. In terms of the ideas, like I don't sit down at my desk all the time and go, okay, got 2 hours, I'm going to write like some really cool sketches that are going to hurt all these people that I'm punching up at. It's
yeah.
more like I'm walking down the street or I'm playing soccer and I think, like the Palestinian Authority, do you know what that's a bit like? And then in this instance, when I'm taking on topics that are not overly familiar to me, I first of all do a load of reading, and then
Yeah.
what I'll also do is I'll ask Palestinian friends. So I'm lucky enough at this point now to have like really good buddies in Cork and Dublin, who are Palestinian or from Jordan or whatnot, and they understand way more intimately the nuances. So I'll throw out an idea and I'll check with them. And one friend of mine, Talha, will actually like check scripts for me. So I feel it has that authenticity then. And again, not asking politicians or not asking big institutions, asking people, well-educated representatives of their people.
I think that's fascinating, really, because I'm a translator by profession, and really what you're describing there
Oh, well.
is the true authentic process of what translation should be. You know, is that you are getting it
Yeah,
from authentic sources on the ground there, and you are doing fantastic work in localizing it for a Irish and British audience, generally
yeah,
speaking. Like, you know, so it really is interesting. And like you say, necessity being the mother of invention. The low production values, I think, work in its favor too. Like, you know,
yeah.
it's definitely adds to the comedy of it all for sure.
And I've worked my way up now where because there's a lot of eyeballs on them, I'm able to like there's a local guy, Sean Downey is his name. He's just a young guy and he's like sticking his head above the parapet, which I think is so rare when I'll speak for myself. When I was young, I found it harder, I think, to kind of go, oh, I'm going to go into these tricky areas where I'm going to get
Yeah,
backlash. But as a young person, he's just like, I'm pro-Palestinian. He's at all the marches and he's putting his name to stuff. And he's brilliant. He's amazing. He's just a young, hungry, brilliant filmmaker. So he's been shooting a lot of my stuff and editing a lot of my stuff lately. So really, it's just once the idea is clear, he'll rock up and shoot it, and he'll put it together. We might edit together a little bit, but it's kind of in his hands, and it's up to me then to take the flack
yeah,
for the content if there's going to be flack. So that's why I do a lot of research. And in the case of the Palestinian Authority sketch, like I'm not quite sure what it's like in Britain, but I know for sure in Ireland there's a kind of a sense that the Palestinian Authority represents Palestinians. So if the Palestinian Authority says they're happy, for instance, with our politicians going to the White House, that's kind of taken as read then.
yeah,
So I needed to speak to Palestinians, as you have already said, in terms of translation, that being a great analogy, and they were able to say, well, actually, the Palestinian Authority don't speak for us at all. That's not to say there's not good people in the
yeah.
PA, and there's good people in the PA in Ireland, and I know for a fact there are good people in the PA based in Britain, but they don't represent Palestinians. And actually, we would love the Palestinian Authority's role in all this nightmare to be lampooned. That's the feedback that I got, and I go to people who know their stuff and who represent their people, ordinary people, not politicians.
I mean, that's fascinating. You know, I mean, I do think that the same is true here. That word authority in the PA is a bit larger than it really
Yeah.
should be. You know, but thinking about it in terms of politics as well, do you see yourself any similarity between the role that you're criticizing of the Palestinian Authority there in that video, and, for example, the role that might have historically been played by the political establishment in Ireland?
Totally. I mean, I wouldn't be a big Fine Gael guy for any of your listeners. Like we have two establishment parties in Ireland that I was playfully saying to George Galloway the last time we were talking that are kind of two cheeks of the same arse, kind of affected like a little bit like
Totally.
Labour and the Tories, I suppose. Um, and Fine Gael would traditionally have been the party that would look out for corporatist interests the most. They're possibly the better at diplomacy, but they're effectively the same ideas. They're both hovering in the centre. Fine Gael would probably be centre right, whether they would like to admit it or not. And Fianna Fáil claim to be centre left, which is laughable, like, but that would be their claim. But absolutely, I mean, I was just talking to a Palestinian yesterday who said, like, the Palestinian Authority are our Fine Gael. Like, that's the way that he described it,
Right.
that made a lot of sense. And if a representative from Fine Gael was speaking at an event, I don't know, across the world, and I was there as an Irish person, just because they're Irish doesn't mean that I'd be rushing to see them because they would represent all the regressive policies that for me blight Ireland. So just because like we've got this kind of parochial thing in Ireland as well of, recently the Taoiseach, the leader of the country, was from Cork, and you get some messaging in Cork going like I'm from Cork, so I should be really proud that a Cork man is leading the country, even though I think his policies are,
Yeah.
absolutely the worst thing I could imagine for the country to be pursuing. So I would judge people on what they're doing for ordinary people, like for working class people and for oppressed people, not on, oh my God, he actually, used to be the principal of a school that I went to. Like that's kind of
It's
neither here nor there, you
it
know?
is it is endemic to these parts, like, as I talk about, talk about being home, like, and I actually have to catch myself on doing it sometimes as well. It's very easy trap to slip into, like,
Yeah. But Ireland is a tiny, tiny country, as you know, so it's natural to do that. It's
Yeah.
very hard to criticize people here as well, because it's like someone's going to know someone who knows someone directly that you've criticized, so you might meet them in Aldi, and now you have to face them face to face, So if we had a larger population, it would be easier. But I suppose just to go back to what I was saying, I try to be led by just doing my own reading and talking to people who know their stuff. So yeah, so the Fine Gael Palestinian Authority analogy, I think, is kind of useful enough that, the outside optics might be one thing, but if you just kind of zone in a little bit, then, the so-called representatives are actually quite guilty of aiding and abetting the Israeli regime. And that's something that I've read time and time again. And again, I've heard from ordinary Palestinians. So at that point, then you have to be a little bit brave and say, I've got something, a decent following now of people who would expect me to be incisive with what
Yeah.
I'm doing and not to be playing to any gallery at all. Like, so I think I just need to kind of, without being lofty about it, just try and pursue the truth. Because
Oh,
otherwise,
yeah.
what's the point? No.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean it's interesting you say that, because it is one of the principal reasons why I'm doing what I do here rather than back home, is that internecine, small town, almost incestuous nature of the political scene back there. Like,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
it takes better man than me to negotiate that. Like, for sure.
Certainly better than me anyway, man. Yeah, I try to stay, however difficult it is down south, I try to stay out of it up north.
For sure, for sure. I mean, it brings me on nicely then to the next question, because it's not just yourself. Obviously, there's people doing great things back in Ireland. People like Claire Daly and Mick
Yeah,
Wallace
amazing.
in the European Parliament. Also, Blinja Nachreilly,
That's
the
right.
lawyer for the South African ICJ case.
Yeah.
Do you think? I mean, this really is a sort of self-evident question, like, but it's just an excuse to get talking about this. Do you think that the legacy of British imperialism in Ireland has prompted this natural, not just sympathy but empathy with the Palestinian people and their cause?
Ah, absolutely. Again, I was talking to a Palestinian friend about this yesterday, and I feel like it's a mutual understanding that's come in. It's not
Yeah,
like the Palestinians are in Ireland and we're kind of helping them, or, we're shedding light on them because we've been through something as well. Their, I think, passion and their resilience and their celebration of their own culture and identity, actually, like pride in that, is kind of reawakening a similar thing in Ireland. Because, like in the north, because the conflict is so recent, an understanding of British imperialism in the north is that's a very obvious thing. That's within touching distance. They're still living with the legacy of British imperialism in the north. Friends of mine are. In the south, I think we've, like, the Pink Floyd song "Comfortably Numb" always comes to mind about Ireland a little bit in the south, because we're kind of on our way now to being a kind of a quite middle class. For a while now, we've had ups and downs economically, but we're pretty steady economic power in the EU for a while.
yeah,
And I think we've lost touch with our colonial past. Now, does that mean that I think we should all get, pitchforks and start running around the place shouting about the Brits? No, of course not. But if you completely let your past go, you kind of, I think you lose your way then as to where you're going and what you're about. So there's a kind of a decolonizing process is happening in the South through this relationship with Palestine. Because every time you go to a march or every time you talk to a Palestinian and they talk about being dehumanized, they talk about being labeled terrorists, they talk about having cartoons written about them in the Washington Post depicting them as subhuman. These things are ringing serious bells for Irish people, like, because this is the exact playbook um, of the British imperialists.
yeah,
So is a lovely thing happening, actually, right? Which is it's a strange thing to say in the middle of a genocide, but I mean, I'm pretty much weekly now at events, be they fundraisers or marches with Palestinians, and it's a beautiful kind of to and fro emotionally connecting between people. And it's a horrible thing that it took a genocide for it to happen. There's always been this soft kind of tacit connection between Ireland and Palestine, but I think it's really, really strong now, and it's benefiting both communities greatly. And I feel like I'm on a bit of a rant now, but I feel like
That's
decolonizing.
what you're here for, Tadhg. Don't worry about that.
Thank you, thank you. My partner doesn't really let me talk like this, so this is just therapy for me in a way. Um, but genuinely though, I think decolonizing doesn't mean we should be careful about kind of, oh, we want to get every shred of like, get the Brits out. It's not that. Like, British imperialism happened and there were benefits to it. Like, I'm speaking the English language now. I'm communicating with people in all around the world who also have the English language. Whether we agree with how that was impinged on people is for another podcast, but it has happened. But I think we're all alive today and we need to look at what's glorious about Irishness, like our language, for instance. Like I'm back learning the
Yeah,
language at the moment and I'm gone into it with I've been tipping away with it. But again, it's Palestinians around me kind of going the way that they celebrate their culture. I'm like, my God, I should be
yeah,
speaking. Like, I'll
it's
finish on this now because
infectious.
I am definitely ranting at this point. But I was at an event in Naas in Kildare last week doing a gig, Oscuelga, for about 20 minutes. Now, I was ropey as hell, right? But we were at this Irish event in the morning, and there was a man there from Gaza who's been in Ireland for 3 months. His sister's was murdered, and he's in Ireland now. And he's been here for 3 months. He came with very little English, and he got up at the end and he spoke in English like wonderfully well. And then he spoke for about 3 or 4 sentences Oscuelga because he's learning Irish now as well. And I
Oh,
was like, these people are
puts you to
just
shame. It's
puts you to
on the
shame.
one
And
hand, it's terribly impressive, really impressive, but on the other hand, it puts you to shame. It really does.
like I was going home going, like I think he's got a flair for language. I was trying to rationalize his
Oh yeah, yeah.
brilliance,
That's
make
exactly what you
myself feel
do. Yeah,
better.
yeah. That's exactly what you do. Because I'm just a wee kid from East Belfast, so Irish language was never on my agenda growing up. But I did come around to try to plug away at it for but again during lockdown that was on my list. I never got anywhere with it. But so you see or now you hear about people like that, and it's
And
impressive, but
there
also.
there's some amazing people from a unionist background who are kind of leading the way with the resurgence in the language as well, which again
Yeah.
is just such a beautiful thing. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it was very much sort of David Irvine and his wife, especially, who
correct.
back in the day would have
Yeah,
been at the forefront of that. David Irvine, God rest him, was a
an
true leader
amazing man.
for East
Yeah.
Belfast. But yeah, I mean, do you think we talked there about the ICJ and the case that was brought there? What impact do you think that has had, and not just impact or lack of it on the ground, but impact on the media, impact in the court of public opinion? What sort of historical legacy do you think that will be a part of, 10 years maybe down the line?
It's it's just it's just so hard to say, isn't it? I mean, sometimes when I watch, which I occasionally watch, like a BBC or a CNN or whatever, just to get a sense of what people are, if that's what they watched and what they're seeing. Because I think sometimes we can all get in our little bubbles of kind of, just watching kind of lefty independent news. Um, but I feel like I'm not sure what difference it's made to mainstream media in terms of the narrative and the messaging. I think what it has certainly done is it's yet another example of the hypocrisy that we've been talking about earlier. Like, for instance, the first day of the hearing where South Africa is putting the case across, not being live on CNN or BBC, but then the Israeli response the next day being live. Like at that point,
Right.
there was something about that. I definitely just got caught up with that in my head. I was like, you're now no longer hiding. Like, are you saying that this is not an interesting case, like that people wouldn't be interested in it, but
Mm.
that you're just coming in on the second day just shows so much bias. So I suppose to answer your question in terms of mainstream media messaging, I've noticed very little difference, to be honest. But what I have noticed for sure is that the ICJ and the widespread censorship online across social media, these are kind of key things that have made the ordinary person, I think, really realize that no, they're not paranoid at all. And that there is this kind of concerted effort to swallow or censor or hide pro-Palestinian voices or the pro-Palestinian narrative. And ordinary people are, I mean, there's marches in Cork every week, solidly now. I think it's 23 weeks, like center of the city, taking over the city for about an hour every week. Never in my life, and I've
Yeah.
spoken to people twice my age, never in my life have I seen anything like it. Um, like Cork is not a massively, like Ireland obviously is not a massive place. Cork, in all little towns around the place, have like rallies and events and marches. So I suppose to answer your question in a long-winded way, I'm seeing in terms of ordinary people, the swell of support, it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And it's just horrific that it has taken this level of death, this level of murder and mayhem for it to happen. But ordinary people are seeing through the bullshit. I don't think the mainstream media is at all, sadly, but I think it's more important that people do in a way, because people will ultimately dictate what way the media go and what way the politicians
Oh
go
yeah,
anyway.
yeah. I mean, 100%. If the media sense that the public opinion is swaying far too much in one way, they will have to hedge their bets and try to address that, won't they?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, there's all sorts going on around here. I think first of all, actually, I mean, you mentioned about these ongoing protests in Cork. Now, I'm in Birmingham, which obviously has a sizable Muslim
Yes.
Asian population. So to hear that there are ongoing protests, lively protests in towns like Cork, which I don't presume has a very large Pakistani or Muslim population.
No, it's like, I mean, it's bigger than you would think, I'd say,
Mm.
for sure, but it's not. Like, put it this way, these marchers are not being led by people from a Muslim background. Like,
Yeah,
they're being led by ordinary Irish people. And like, we're lucky enough to have an awful lot of Palestinian voices and Arab voices. They're a big part of the organizing now, but it was not, that was not the initial impetus. It was Irish people who care, I think. And as I
yeah,
say, that group is, I mean, I'm talking to people all the time in Ireland that they started off, there's like 12 people in their WhatsApp group on October 6th, their pro-Palestine WhatsApp group. And now they've like a couple of hundred, 300, 400. They can't control it. Like, it's an admin nightmare.
yeah,
But it's amazing though, and it's a real, yeah, it's just a testament to kind of real meaningful solidarity. I think the barbarity of the Israeli regime as well. Two things have happened, I think, to do it. One is the barbarity, that no matter whether you're watching BBC or you're watching Al Jazeera or something in the middle, the kind of statistics, they kind of don't lie. The facts of the matter don't lie, and the images don't lie. So people are so shocked into the barbarity that I'm meeting people on marches all the time that have never been on a political march in their life. They're not political people. That's new. Like, that's completely new. Like, I posted a video yesterday saying, because my TikTok was banned, and
yes, I saw that.
I had,
Yeah,
I had lots of messages from because I get like DMs, you can't control the DM requests. So I have lots of Zionists in my DMs, and Twitter was like, a plum with celebration from Zionists that my TikTok
huh.
had been banned, So
A
I
good
just thought,
sign
I
you're doing
actually thought it
something
was,
right.
exactly, I just thought it was amusing. Like,
Yeah,
so I did this video saying, like, I wouldn't be celebrating so quickly, like, because you've actually created millions of me around the world, and
yeah,
like the amount of messages I got from people saying that I was right, but also that another point I made in the video was like, people that weren't even particularly politically active beforehand are now totally politically engaged, and they're like organizing rallies. They're like, that missing ingredient of people who are disaffected. Actually
yeah.
trying to organize people, like, is so hard. I know there's a weekly meetup in Cork for people who are disenfranchised with the way the government's handling this, and I would say probably everything. So it's terrifying for people in positions of power.
And truly warming to our hearts as well. I mean, it is heartwarming to see that there's a tangible legacy of organization that'll be left by all of this. And
Exactly.
it's like you said earlier on. You're exactly right when you said it's a tragedy that it takes a genocide to do this. It's like that old cliche that it takes a funeral to bring everyone back together again. But
Yeah.
it's that same dynamic at work. No, we've only got a few minutes left, Tag.
Yep.
Before we sign off, I obviously want to get your thoughts on the situation in politics back at home. Obviously, we now have a Sinn Féin First Minister north of the border. Over the last sort of few years, Sinn Féin have made decent inroads into the sort of traditional dual party system south of the border as well. It's a cliche question that I always hate trying to answer, but where do you
Oh,
see things
cheers.
going from here? Uh, what uh, uh, what obstacles still lie in the path towards a united Ireland? And slightly similar but slightly different question is what obstacles are in Sinn Féin's path, particularly if they're to be the ones to get us there?
Okay, that's a loaded question, and that's actually kind of a loaded gun of a question as well. So I'm going to be careful. But look, I would be an Irish Republican. I would like to see United Ireland. I would like to see an egalitarian United Ireland. I'm not like up the green and hammer the orange and let's get revenge for what happened. Like, in terms of 100 years of second class citizenship for nationalists. Like I'm not a narrow nationalist. Um, I am also not a member of a political party, and I would say my Irish republicanism is not tethered to any political party or person. You ask about Sinn Féin, I'm going through a really difficult patch right now because I would be traditionally a Sinn Féin supporter. I mightn't have always I have to vote for Sinn Féin, but they would have traditionally been the party that would have been furthering the United Ireland cause. So that
Yeah.
it's the United Ireland would be the thing that got me into politics. So whatever party's doing that for me, I'm on it. That would have been me in kind of the end of school and college and stuff. And obviously I've grown from there. But I felt the Sinn Féin were best placed to do it. I think them sending representatives, leadership representatives to the White House during the genocide is going to, I think it was the wrong thing to do morally. And I actually worry now that it's going to be a massive tactical blunder as well, because, and again, we're all in our own bubbles, but the sense I'm getting from on the street with young people, and I'm not talking about Palestinians, I'm not talking about Arabs, I'm talking about young people who are white people like me,
Yeah.
mostly kind of saying they're shocked that Sinn Féin would do this because it felt like they were always traditional, which they were, and Sinn Féin traditionally have done incredible work with Palestinians and highlighting that connection in the
Yeah.
Palestinian cause. And that needs to be stated. So I'm also not going to be one of these people who's like, you've done one thing I disagree with, so I'm throwing everything out and every friend I've ever made in Sinn Féin. I mean, I've got close friends in Sinn Féin, so it's a tricky one. But to answer your question, I worry that this is going to be a calamitous blunder, because if they turn enough young people off them because of this, what seems like putting their own interests and possibly corporatist interests ahead of Palestinian solidarity, if young people stop voting for them, then they're not going to get into power. And then we're going to be left with another version of Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael government.
Yeah, it'll be one step forward, two steps back. Yeah, I can see exactly where you're coming from there, and it is a hard thing to juxtapose the visit there to the US, to juxtapose that with some of the beautiful artwork that's gone up on the International Wall in West Belfast. I don't know whether you've seen any of that, but it has been
absolutely
really beautiful work, reproducing the art of Palestinian artists. Yeah, it's that is nice to see anyway.
I
All
mean,
right, well, this has been fascinating. I wish we could talk for longer, but I'm sure this is not the last time that we'll get together. Hopefully, in happier circumstances in the future. All the best to what you're doing. Keep on doing it. Our questions about social media and that, we're not simply out of curiosity. We're always looking for people doing good things that we can learn from and steal from. Yeah.
steal away, boy. Steal away.
We absolutely will. Is there anything that you'd like to plug, whether that's books or a tour, your own social media or anything like that?
I tell you now, right? So people can find me on any of the usual sources except for TikTok, because I've been banned from that. But if people do want to find me, I'll be on Instagram and Twitter and all that nonsense. But what I would like to say is I started doing, and I'm not a podcast guy, but I've started doing a podcast called the Free Palestine podcast, and it'll be on all your usual places because there's a dearth of opportunities for Palestinians to speak. I think in the West, we've got representatives from the IDF on telly around the clock, but not from ordinary Palestinians. So I've already recorded a few episodes. Actually, there's one episode up and there's two coming out this week. So it's called the Free Palestine podcast. You can go to my YouTube and it's on all the usual places. And other than that, if you can't share my content, just share some pro-Palestinian content and prioritize Palestinians.
Fantastic. That's great, Tadhg. Thanks a lot for that. And we will share that podcast through our social media as well. That I'm looking forward to listening to that.
Gurav Mila Magat.
All right. Cheers. Take care, mate.
Cheers, buddy.